Okay, everyone, go into your working folder and open up SaveForWeb.ai. This technically is the last chapter in this particular series. However, you know what? It should be probably close to the first chapter. Now, by that I mean we're going into saving and printing options. We're talking intent, aren't we? In other words, where is this going? Now, I'll be the first to admit, on a computer, like using Adobe Illustrator, basically you can make mistakes or not really know exactly what you want to do with it, and it's still going to be easy to fix. Let's say this guy right here, this very colorful palette. I'm designing it for a 4-color press job. If I decide I want to go to the web, it's not really going to be that much different. This lesson actually is mostly about saving for the web, but not just for the web. How about calling that Save for Monitor? Because if you go up, for example, to the word File, you actually have an option for saving to Microsoft Office. Now, what does that do? Well, if you select it, it saves it as a PNG. We'll talk more about those later. The PNG is actually the native format for Office products. If you use Microsoft PowerPoint like I do, like it, it's a nice program, and you save your documents as PNGs, you'll have soft drop shadows, transparency. They will look beautiful. People will rave about your PowerPoint presentations. Now, there's another way to save those that way, through Save for Web. So let's do this. Let me use the Control key on Windows, Command key on a Mac, and use the minus key, which allows me to zoom in a little bit or zoom down. And you can say I have 3 artboards. Artboards are actually really cool to work with. Now, we talked about those earlier, but I can choose, for example, when I'm saving a document to save a particular artboard. I can say Save for Web using a particular artboard, which we're going to do. There are a lot of advantages to using additional artboards, and they don't really take up any file size. So, we have artboard 1 selected. You can see that down here. It says 1. Go up to the word File on the pull-down menu and go down to Save for Web, or Monitor, or PowerPoint. And here we go. Now, let me do this. Let me come over here and pull that over. One of the things that I think is really extremely important is when you're compressing an image for the web or PowerPoint, is you want to be able to see the original and you want to be able to see the one you're compressing, which we have. The original's on the left and the compressor is on the right. But you also want to make sure you are at 100%, not 105, not 95, not 200, because you won't really see an accurate look of how it's going to view unless you're at 100%. So we're fine there. We're great. If you come up here, you have a button for original. That's nice, but I don't want to see the original. And I don't just want to see the optimized. I want to see them both, so I can compare this one to that one. Over here are the controls. Now, we're just going to go through some basic stuff in this lesson, and we'll get into what controls do in the next lesson. But this one right now is a PNG 24, which is my absolute best of the lot. It doesn't compress and lose information. It compresses and keeps everything original. So this image looks absolutely as good as this one over here, but the file size is 145.2K out of 2.05 meg. That's kind of big. Now, you have actually your presets up here. If we come over here into this option right here, you've got your 4 options for what you save this as: GIF, JPEG, PNG 8, and 24. Now, let's start with GIF, because this actually would work with GIF. If we come over here and GIF it, we have a problem. GIFs don't handle soft transparency very well. They kind of cut it out with a knife. It's either transparent or it isn't, so you get this. Now, we could turn off transparency, and that doesn't look too bad. But now you're dealing with a block of white. Now, if you're running this against a white background, that's fine. But what if it isn't white? Well, you come over here and click this button right here, and you could choose a different color. If you're working on, say, the internet, you would know the exact color of the background, and hopefully it isn't like, say, a pattern or a gradient, and you might be able to pull that off. But sad to say, if you're working with GIFs, which this image is a GIF kind of image, the problem is going to be, because of the drop shadow, it's not going to look good. So before we go any further, let's do this. Get out of here for a second. I have the shadow in a separate layer. I'm going to turn it off. Now we come back again, Save for Web, and we go back into GIF. Let me move that over. Looks great. Suggestion: if you're working with images that are clip art, and GIF is good for those, that is called basically graphic interchange file format. It uses RLE compression, Hourly compression basically is a compression method that loves solid colors, and clip art has a lot of solid colors in it. GIF does work pretty good for this, okay, but it doesn't like drop shadows, so I would avoid them. Now, the other one that's kind of like comparable to GIF is the PNG 8. Let's skip this one for a second, JPEG. Watch what happens over here and over here. One eye here, one eye here. Actually, not much of anything. The options are the same, and it looks the same over here. Now, we are at 49.16 on a PNG 8, and we are at 53, so it helps to go to the PNG 8. What is the difference? Well, the GIF format is the oldest of them. It's one of the first formats to come out for the internet along with JPEG. But the PNG 8 is beginning to replace it. The World Wide Web Consortium has considered PNGs actually native to the internet today, so I would suggest, unless you're working with people that have very old browsers, you might want to consider using the PNG 8. It is a nice format, so it'll work. Now, we'll talk about these options in the next lesson. The other one is, of course, PNG 24, which works great, but let's go to JPEG. Now, JPEG will do the same thing. It makes the file smaller. We're down to 33, but JPEG has one drawback, in that it doesn't support transparency at all. And you're going to have to put it against a background and choose a color over here. And hopefully you can blend that into whatever you're working with. So in terms of file size, JPEG probably would be the best one. But in terms of practicality, you're probably going to use a GIF or a PNG 8, one of the two. Let's go ahead and get out of here for a second. Let's go to our second one. Now, our second artboard, that is a graphic, that is a gradient mesh. If I go to the word View on the pull-down menu and go to Outline, whoa, it's pretty complicated. But it looks almost photo-like, doesn't it? Let's go ahead and go Save for Web on this guy. And let's start with GIF. And let me go ahead and move this over so we can see them both like that, 100%. Now, the GIF format actually only goes to 256 colors. That's the maximum you can get. You can see the color table down here. You can actually work with that and change it if you want to. That doesn't look too bad. Actually, in this case, if you look at it really closely, it's not quite as good as this one over here, but practically almost as good. And because we're not using any softness in terms of drop shadows, actually seems to come across pretty good. Again, you could turn off transparency here and put it against a white background if you want to. Now, the PNG 8, we're at 42.5. If we go to PNG 8, we're at 36. Again, if you're looking at your audience on the web, and your web audience is running browsers above 4 or 5, basically I would say go to a PNG 8 because it's going to be smaller and it's going to work. Now, we have other options down here like image size, and like I said, we'll talk more about this stuff in the next lesson. But if you're working with an image that's photo-like and you can afford not to use transparency, you might actually want to go to the JPEG. Now, we're at 36.09. We're now at 19. And that's actually at a pretty good quality setting of 60. But again, the problem's going to be it doesn't support transparency. Let's go ahead and get out of here. And our last artboard is a combination. I have a photograph and I have text. So if we go back up here and go into Save for Web, let me go ahead and move this over. Even though I can't see the whole thing, I would rather see only a portion at 100% than shrink it down. Okay, I want to see it at 100%. Come over here. The PNG 24 is the best. I mean, it really is the best of the lot. But they create big files that on the internet are kind of hard to shift. So that's 488.6. That's a lot. I would suggest that since we have text, which is vector, and we have a photograph, which would be best with JPEG, err toward the photograph. In other words, use JPEG. So we've got 488.6. We go JPEG on this thing. We're down to 107. Now, we'll go even further down when we talk about the options. But that's not too bad, and the image looks pretty good. Now, in terms of recapping here, let me go back to number 1. If you have something very clip artish like this, then I would suggest PNG 8 or the GIF format. However, you need to drop or lose all the drop shadows because they're not going to work. If you're working with something like this one, which is almost photographic, if you can afford to use a white background, go JPEG because it would be the best. But if not, again, since we don't have a drop shadow, we could PNG 8 it or we could GIF it. If we are working with something that's a combination, photos and text in this case, I would err toward the photo and go JPEG with it and compress it down. 3 different ways to save images for the web, but not just for the web. Don't forget all that other stuff we have out there, like Microsoft Office.